out from closed session. We reviewed conference with labor negotiators regarding CSEA negotiations, and information was shared. And item B, conference with labor negotiators with SMEA. Information was also shared, and upcoming meeting dates were also shared. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Laura, would you do the honors, please?
Yes, right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want to do a roll call?
Okay. And we do need to do an additional roll call, please.
Mr. Hollinshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Torres?
Here.
Mr. Laura?
Here.
Mrs. Correa?
Here. I can't hear you, Kristen.
Are you still plugged in?
I am.
Oh, okay.
On your, is your volume down on top of your computer?
Very I heard everything on the right here.
Far right hand side.
Oh, here.
Can you hear now?
Okay. I was hearing everything just fine in closed session. So,
How about now?
okay. All right. So our calendar of upcoming meetings and events on,
If I could interject, I would, as part of the calendar, I would like to recommend that we convene a special meeting on the 24th of February for the purposes of the COVID.
Luke, you're muted.
You're muted. Sorry, I was muted. We can all hear each other. We're sitting up here. What I'd like to recommend is that we append the calendar to include a special meeting for February 24th for the purposes of the COVID reopening plan, and also for a closed session for personnel action. And would recommend that we convene closed session at 5:30 and an open session at 6. So we have consensus of the board.
thumbs up.
Just,
Okay, everybody? Okay. Then I will include.
thank you for that.
I will include that in the calendar.
Thank you.
So moving on, February 12th, which is Friday, is Lincoln's holiday. School and district offices will be closed. Monday, February 15th, is the official President's Day holiday, and also schools and offices will be closed. The addition of a special meeting on Wednesday, February 24th has been added to the calendar this evening, with closed session beginning at 5:30, open session at 6 p.m. to review considerations for school reopening and to deal with some personnel matters. And following that, March 10th is our regularly scheduled board meeting. Public comment. The public comments are intended for members of the public to address the Board of Education on items involving the school district. Such testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each, 450 words per person subject, and 15 minutes for each topic. If an answer to a special question is requested, the board president will, if appropriate, direct administration to respond in writing. Comments on agenda items?
No comments on agenda items.
Comments on non-agenda items?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Please share.
This first public comment is submitted by Jose Segura. It reads, "Good evening, board members. As most of you know, SMEA has been putting out regular communications for members over the past several years. Regularly connecting with members poses challenges given our membership size and the number of work sites across the district. We try very hard to keep all our members informed and up to date, and the fireside chat with the president is one way we can do that. These regular communications are a mix of text information, video presentations, and links to important documents. I would really appreciate an opportunity to interview each of you for a future fireside chat. It would be great for our members and the community in general to get to know a little bit about each of you. It doesn't matter if you've been on the board for years or if you've just joined. I think viewers would really appreciate the opportunity to hear directly from you. I am proposing conducting short Zoom interviews with each of you. The interview will be recorded and will be just a few minutes long. We will focus on who you are, what your connection is to the SMBSD, what got you interested in running for and serving on a school board, and a brief discussion about the type of impact you believe you can have on education in the Santa Maria Valley. You will each have access and input to the final cut of the interview before anything is shared out. The final interview will be included in upcoming fireside chats, which are posted on our public channel on YouTube. This just means that family, friends, and community members will be able to enjoy the final product. Please consider accepting my invitation to join me in a Zoom interview. I'm sure everyone would love to hear from you and to know a little more about you. I will be contacting each of you by phone to set up a date and time that works best for you. I am very hopeful that each of you will accept this invitation. If you're interested in taking a look at Fireside Chat with the President Communications and videos from this school year, click on the link below. It will take you to a full list with hyperlinks to each. Obviously, I have the paper, so what I'll do is I'll take the address that Jose put in and I'll put it into this Friday's Friday update that goes to the board. And Jose continues, good evening. My name is Jose Segura, and I'm currently the president of the Santa Maria Elementary Education Association. As you know, SMEA and the district have been negotiating a successor contract since early November 2019. Our previous contract expired June 30th, 2020. Over the past 16 months, there has been agreement on several articles, which is awesome. There has also been slow progress on other articles, which dig deep into our workday and personal life, as well as our ability to maintain reasonable representation. I'm addressing you all today because I know firsthand that our school board can have a direct impact on the negotiations process and the direction the district's team moves at the bargaining table. This was evident in the board's decision to direct their team not to negotiate additional leave for the chapter president, which has zero negative financial impact on the district, does not negatively impact student learning, and provides consistency for students. The association was proposing a continuation of full-time release for the chapter president. The district's team returned to the table after consulting with the school board and refused to negotiate that additional release time. The district team cited direction from the school board, this school board, as the reason for their refusal to bargain additional release. If this board can have a direct impact on the negotiation of the association president's release time, it can also have a direct impact on the negotiating of the final few articles. The demand on educators is ever increasing, both during the pandemic and before. These demands on our professional and personal time are coming from both outside and within our district. There is not much we can do about the external forces being applied onto our district certificated staff, but we can definitely do something about the internal demands. All SMEA is asking is that our personal time be respected and the district acknowledge through negotiations that there is value in members spending time with their families, friends, and pets. Allowing them the time to participate in activities that bring them joy, calmness, and relief, instead of attempting to negotiate a mandated infringement on that much needed and valued personal time. Banners and slogans are great, but actions are what will make the difference between having a workforce that feels valued and appreciated and one that feels dismissed and neglected. I ask this board consider directing their bargaining team to settle the outstanding articles quickly and fairly so that we can put this negotiation cycle to bed. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. We really do appreciate it. The next comment is from Andy Watson, a teacher and resident of Santa Maria. Good evening, Board President Cordero and members of the school board. In my third grade classroom social studies, we are studying economics, more specifically human capital. Teachers, administrators, and staff develop human capital in our students that strengthen the community. There is also our internal human capital, and now I'm talking specifically about teachers and this current labor impasse. In recent years, I've seen the erosion of collaborative institutions in our district, such as C&I and COT. Teachers are getting the message to not go outside the approved curriculum, stay on the pacing calendar. I've seen this before. It was called Reading First in 2001. I just don't think this approach will get us to where we need to be in improving student achievement because it disempowers the very professionals at the center of instruction, the teacher. Now, teachers are faced with language brought forth by administration defining professional duties in an overly broad way. This really guts workday language in our contract that has existed for many years. This language protects teachers and administrators by defining where the lines are. I know there are some outstanding issues about after school and night meetings. I believe and advocate that the union has to be on the side of parents and families. I urge both sides to identify the specific issues and seek compromise and a prompt signed agreement. I think this is fitting with the values of this district and community. I also think that lessening the number of conference days works against parent participation. Because of scheduling parents and interpreters, we need to retain the current number of conference days. Thank you. And that was Andy Watson. The next comment is from Kristen Patterson from Arianas Junior High. My name is Kristen Patterson, and I'm a special education teacher at Arianas Junior High. First of all, I thank you for your service during this time and always. I know you want the best for the students of Santa Maria Bonita. I hope that you know in your hearts that the teachers of our district too. We spend countless hours planning ways to deliver instruction and provide enrichment opportunities for our students. Many of us have families of our own as well. We are constantly being pulled between the needs of our own families and the family of students we create in our classrooms. I know I am not the exception. Many of us pour our hearts and souls into this job, hoping that our efforts will pay off for generations to come. I am writing today to bring up concerns with the district wanting to change Article 5 of our bargaining agreement to add more duties to our day and without compensation. We work extremely hard already, and as my previous comment describes, our own families are paying the price when our work-home life is out of balance. Further, I do what I do because I love my students and want to help them create habits that will serve them through well now and throughout their lives. When duties are added to my day, my stress goes up and it detracts from the focus I have on the school, even when those duties are well-meaning. Currently, I appreciate the professional judgment extended to me for me to use in serving my students and their families. I take my job seriously, and I believe that most teachers are like me in that belief. But right now, we are not feeling trusted or appreciated. Additionally, as a special education teacher, I routinely hold IEP meetings, some of which are scheduled outside the workday due to students' family availability. Many special education teachers like myself want to be available to our families on their time, but the special education MOU has expired and the district doesn't seem to plan on continuing it. Again, by catering to our students' family needs, my own family time requires an adjustment, and it seems fair that we are compensated for that adjustment. Finally, I am concerned about the reluctance of the district to allow our union president full-time release. In my 7 years in this district, we have grown immensely, and so have his duties. With the union paying the cost of this release, this seems like an easy decision to continue our partnership for our students' benefit. We are all here with the common goal of creating a better future for Santa Maria. Thank you for your time. Kristen Patterson. The next comment is submitted by Brian Gong. Hello, I would like to request the following comment be read aloud at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Well, I guess I didn't read that part. Good evening, board members. My name is Brian Gong, and I'm a kindergarten teacher at Bonita Elementary School. I am a site representative for the Santa Maria Elementary Education Association, a negotiations team member, and I am the elected minority at-large representative for the California Teachers Association Channel Islands Service Center Council. I am commenting today on the board's decision to not support the SMEA president up to full-time release in Article 3 of the SMEA contract, as well as the decision to increase further duties on SMEA members in Article 5. Since I have been teaching in the Santa Maria Bonita School District, the SMEA president has utilized full-time release when membership was less than 700 members. Now that SMEA membership is over 900 members, it is concerning that the school board would not see the benefit of a full-time release president, not just for association business, but for meeting and working with district administration regarding district business. For the past 3 years, with no additional cost to the district, the president has utilized full-time release. It was shared with the association that the board rejected up to full-time release for the SMEA president. And when the association asked the district for a student-centered response for this rejection, no response was given. Part-time release would mean splitting another teacher and the association president for an entire class of students for the school year. In regard to Article 5 and the additional duties the district would like to add to the contract, I am dismayed that the district and the school board feel teachers require more work commitments, responsibilities, and obligations in and out the workday. Does the school board really feel that during a global pandemic, when teachers in our district are working longer and harder, sacrificing time with their own families to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of their students, that now is the time to add more duties on teachers? I ask that you please reconsider your decision regarding Article 3 and Article 5, and I thank you for your time. And that's Brian Gollum from Bonita Elementary. And then there's one more from Jose Rodriguez from El Camino Junior High School. Good evening. My name is Jose Rodriguez, and I am an 8th grade U.S. history teacher at El Camino Junior High. I've been in this district for 16 years. During that time, I've had an opportunity to get to know each of you, especially during the Will Smith era when SMEA and the district worked together so closely. It is my hope that we can return to that relationship someday, because it seems that in recent years, SMEA and our teachers have not been given the respect due to us. Let me be honest. I am contributing to public comments today to express my concerns shared by my colleagues regarding the district's efforts to insert into the contract numerous so-called professional duties and requirements to work additional hours before and after school. It's incredible to me, after almost a year of distance learning in the midst of a global pandemic that has claimed the lives of 450,000 people and disrupted the lives of millions of American families, that our district doesn't seem to respect the professionalism of our teachers. It seems to me that I read somewhere that heroes work here, but teachers don't have the feeling that they are heroes. Instead, we're looking at a situation in which more duties and more hours are proposed for our workday, while at the same time we're being told that the district is proposing absolutely nothing in terms of salary in return. Why isn't this school board at all concerned about the work-life balance of the teachers who work in this district, teachers who have provided high-quality instruction in this district since 1949? Because if you talk to any teacher for even 30 seconds, you'll know that we are stressed and working harder in many cases than ever before. In addition to all of this, we're turning back the clock on education with pacing guides, teaching to the textbook, administering weeks worth of testing, and a presumption that teachers have low expectations for students and that they, to use a scientific term, suck. This district can and should do much better than this. Finally, I am formally asking the school board to provide me with a written response as to why I have decided that teachers should not have access to a full-time release president. In my view, this refusal to allow teachers a full-time release president is in effect an interference in the ability of the association to serve its members and protect their rights. I'm not sure why the school board has arrogated unto itself the right to determine how much access we have to representation. So as a voter and teacher, I need an explanation. Thank you, Jose Rodriguez. And that concludes public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Ontiveros. Just as a response to that last comment, while we appreciate the concerns and the opinions shared by all who have submitted those comments, anything that has to do with negotiations is not within our purview to make any kind of written response to. That would, I'm sure, break some kind of a law. It is something that we can certainly have discussion in closed session and give direction to our negotiating team, but a written response is completely inappropriate. So while I know it says in the public comment, that you can request an answer, because it has to do with negotiations, that simply cannot happen. All right, moving on. Approval of the agenda as presented. I would entertain a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, it has been moved by Mrs. Flores, seconded by Mr. Lara. to approve the agenda as presented? All those in favor, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda. We need roll call for consent.
Mr. Hollister,
Aye.
Mr. Valencia,
Aye.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Lara,
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero.
Aye. Consent agenda. Actions proposed for the consent agenda are consistent with adopted policies and approved practices of the district and are deemed routine in nature. They will be acted upon by roll call vote in one motion without discussion unless members of the board request an item's removal, in which event it will be taken up in the order indicated on the main agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, Mr. Hollinshead and Mrs. Flores, second. Okay, Mr. Hollinshead has moved to approve the consent agenda. Mrs. Flores has seconded it. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hollister,
Aye.
Mr. Valencia,
Aye.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Lara,
Aye.
Aye. Action items.
If I could
Oh.
interject for a moment.
Okay,
Because we have the two audit items on here. We have Mr. Essler here with us, and as well as John Raymond, who's the chair of the Bond Oversight Committee. Can I request that we move C and D ahead of A so that we can release them from the meeting?
and ahead of B as well?
And ahead of B, yeah. So we'll make C, D, A, B in that order.
Okay, so we will start with item C, the 2019-20 audit report for the Santa Maria Bonita School District.
Thank you very much, President Cordero. And thank you also for accommodating us, allowing our visitors to jump in first, so they can step back into their regular lives as we continue our board meeting. Rick Essler is here from Eide Bailly. Eide Bailly has been our auditor for a couple of years as the successor to Bavernick, Trying Day and Company. They have been our auditor for much longer. I want to say around 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, being a great partner in making sure our financial statements are prepared well, on time, and then available to the public and also to users of financial statements. Also, as Mr. Ontiveros mentioned, John Raymond, the president of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, is also on with us tonight if you have any questions for him. The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee reviewed these financial statements last night as kind of our wrap-up action, as all of the dollars for the school bond have been spent at this time, and so they've been released from their responsibilities. I understand that Mr. Essler is going to present tonight first on the overall audited financial statements of the district, using a PowerPoint to kind of guide the conversation, and then just provide a narrative about the specific performance audit report and the other audit reports connected just to Measure T. So as we go along, if you have questions, I'm sure Mr. Essler is ready to respond to them. And I'd like to hand it off to Rick Essler.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Matt. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen here. And like this. And here's our PowerPoint. So are you seeing a PowerPoint, Santa Maria?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So, you know, it's a new way of doing presentations this year. And Bill, the engagement partner, or actually the managing partner, put together a little PowerPoint template for us to tailor to districts. And just to kind of make it easier on all of us to just kind of follow a tailored script. It's only about 7-8 slides, and he just kind of wanted to hit the main things in sort of a summary format. But the first thing he wanted to do in his first slide is to thank everybody for working with us. Like at the bottom of the slide there, it says this year is 100% remote. That was his first thing he wanted to put out there, was that he really appreciated all the help of all the sites and all the district staff, just everybody. So we really appreciate it. We thank you a lot. So he wanted to put that up first, the first slide. And then he gave a little bit of a backdrop of the audit process. But the main thing is that he wanted to say thank you. The next slide, the first sentence there says independent auditor's report was unmodified. That's great. It wasn't qualified or any kind of exception. No adjusting journal entries from the unaudited actuals or anything like that. The language, in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects, the respective financial position. And that's what you want to hear. The next little paragraph there says the auditor's report on internal controls noted no report level findings, but did refer to associated body observations reported to management outside the main audit report. And if I remember right, there's like a couple observations, not a big deal. There's always going to be, some, but there really wasn't very many. The opinions on federal and state compliance noted no findings. So right here in this one slide, it's showing that there's an unmodified report, no report level findings. Like if there would have been a finding on some kind of a state compliance or something like that, that would have been not management letter, but report level, none of that. And the opinions on the federal and state compliance with no findings, so no state or no report level finding there, but also that means no risk of going from a low risk auditee to a high risk auditee in federal. So it's a real good, it's a good slide. The next couple of slides basically direct folks to where in the report they can find certain things. And the first one he puts here is the management discussion analysis, the MD&A. The note in the PowerPoint says PDF pages 7 to 16. But if you're looking at a hard copy of the report, the page numbers on the report typically run about 3 numbers lower. So in the report itself is more like 4 to 13. And that basically kind of is consistent throughout the report. Anyway, the MD&A is a real good place to go to get a lot of information in summary format and comparative, because it does compare audit year and prior year. The next, like I say, the next couple of slides, tell you where the statement of net position, which is, might as well say balance sheet, and statement of revenues, kind of income statement, just tells you where these are in the report if you want to target what, something you want to look at specifically. So it's kind of a summary of net position and unrestricted, all that on the net position. Just more summary information in case you wanted numbers of a certain area. The previous slide might be like kind of where you can find some things. These might be some key numbers you want to get to fast if you want to. The general fund increased by 7.9 million to 61.8. Available reserves are at 3% for ADA, your ADA. That's the 3% is the state minimum. And that's where you guys are at. He puts a little note down here almost to the bottom, kind of like the next to the last little arrow. He says, we do not want our clients anywhere near this minimum unless there's fund balance assignments and or designations have been reflected, which is the case in your district. So it's not a going concern issue for us if it's right at the minimum, because there's other assignments. It's not like it's just, that's all there is. So that's this little notation when it's at 3%. And the comment there is that ADA remains relatively steady over the last few years. So that's a good sign too, and another thing that makes us not be concerned about a going concern issue. And that's pretty much it on the PowerPoint presentation on the annual audit report. It's brief, but it's packed. It's got the main items in there, all in just a few slides. So at this point, I guess I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions or concerns or about this PowerPoint of the annual financial audit for the school district. It's an unmodified report. It's a great report. No adjusting entries, no. I'm getting some kind of feedback or kind of.
Board members, any comments or questions?
When I read it, I understood it. It did good. Great job on all parts.
Yeah, it's a good report. I'm getting some kind of background noise and I don't know where it's coming from, but anyway. So any other?
I don't have any questions.
Looks good. Thank you for your work.
So for the bond audit, there is not a PowerPoint presentation. It's pretty straightforward, straight from the report. And there's kind of like two audits. There's the financial audit and the performance audit. Basically, the financial audit kind of reiterates what Matthew had said, that the funds were spent and they are at an ending fund balance in Fund 21 of 0. They're spent. The funds were spent there and no findings in financial audit section. Then going on to the performance, where we kind of look at compliance, the expenditures were compliant with the bond language. And it's just a couple of parts here, purpose, and this is just basically taken from the specific bond language here. So we're watching expenditures that we've tested to see that they're compliant with that. And our sample was 11.9 million, 44% of the total of the 26 million in expenditures. So no findings. And Fund 21 has a 0 fund balance. So all of the funds have been used according to that. So,
I drove by the school today and it looks absolutely gorgeous. It just needs a few students out there on the field.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We have to do an opening ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But very worth every penny.
Yes, and I feel that, over the course since we passed the bond and the expenditures over the past, I don't know how many years, but yeah, we have been appropriately updated and are very well aware of how the money has been spent, and it stretched as far as it could be stretched. We, could definitely use additional money because there are other things that need to be done, especially in the current time. But the fact that that money has been well spent and expenditures have been tracked and everything is as good as it can get. I've been impressed. I don't remember, of course, we hadn't had a bond for, I don't know, forever. So I guess, but, for our district, I really feel like our folks did a good job of prioritizing and spending that money to really get bang for our buck, so to speak. So
Yeah.
great job, and we appreciate the efforts of everyone involved in accomplishing that. So thank you.
Was there
Any-
any, oh, I'm sorry.
Any other comments, board members? Okay, so we kind of reviewed two items. We need to go back to item 7C, the audit report for the school district first. And we need a motion to accept the report as presented or not.
I'll make, accept the 2019-2020 audit, the summary of the school district is presented.
I second.
Okay, Mr. Lara has moved, Mrs. Flores has seconded to accept the 2019-20 audit report for the Santa Maria Bonita School District. All those in favor signify by aye and raise your
Aye.
hand so we can see, or thumbs up. All right, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Good job. And now on to item 7D, Proposition 39 General Obligation Bond. You know, whenever I see GO bond, I have to stop and think, go bond, go, and go back to the general obligation bond. Measure T financial and performance audit for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. So I need a motion to accept this report as well.
I make a motion to accept the proposition 39 general obligation T financial and performance audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
And a
Second. I'll second.
Okay, it has been moved by Mrs. Flores, seconded by Mr. Hollinshead, to accept the Proposition 39 General Obligation Bond Measure T Financial and Performance Audit for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we got everybody. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. If Mr. Raymond is on the phone, he usually has a word or two.
Yeah, I'm right here. I appreciate it, Mrs. Cordero. I just wanted to say thank you for about the 5.5, 6 years that I got to work on this bond. And it was a great pleasure working with Mr. Beecher and my fellow board members, along with Kristen and Jessica, the secretaries, helping us keep it on track. And it was a lot of fun. If you want to do another one of these down the road, let me know and we'll organize and get it passed.
Okay, well, with that, we do thank you for your diligence and dedication in supporting this bond measure. And I don't know if you get back to Santa Maria very much, but you do definitely need to go by and see our beautiful new school.
Oh, I get people who drive by and send me pictures all the time.
Oh, good.
I still have a great network of contacts out there. But anyway, you guys be good and have a good one. And I'm going to go to bed now. It's 2-hour time.
Thanks, John.
Take care. Good
All
night,
right,
guys.
thank you. Thank you
Bye.
for your efforts.
And thank you, Rick.
Yes, thank
Thank
you
you very much.
And thanks for
Thank you.
hanging in there with us.
Oh, thanks for moving us up. Appreciate it.
All right, no problem. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Beecher, for facilitating all of that. We will move back to item 7A, which is a resolution 20-11 to approve the absence of a board member from a meeting of the Board of Education. Mr. Ontiveros.
That's exactly what it is. It's the resolution to approve Mrs. Flores' absence from the January 13th meeting.
Any comments or questions? I need a motion.
I'll make the motion to adopt resolution 20-11, approving the absence of board members for meetings of the Board of Education as presented.
And a second.
I second.
Okay, it has been moved by Mr. Laura, seconded by Mr. Hollinshead.
Nope, it was Ricardo.
Ricardo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
Mr.
very
Valencia.
sorry. Okay, thank you. Moved by Mr. Laura, seconded by Mr. Valencia to adopt resolution 20-11, approving the absences of board members from meetings of the Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hollister,
Aye.
Mr. Valencia,
Aye.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Lara,
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero.
Aye. Thank you. The resolution has been approved. And moving to item 7B, significant disproportionality. And I get an A+ for pronouncing that. Assurance of compliance. Ms. Dutra.
Thank you, Board President. So good evening, board members, superintendent, and our community online. Tonight's presentation will be delivered by our Director of Special Education, Rusty Gordon. I'd like to call out his leadership in the work the team has already done around this and in the long process ahead. And we can't forget to thank the amazing special ed team that works side by side with him, Barbara Mendez, Christy Callahan, Julie Hansen, Megan Farjan. And we greatly appreciate the thoughtfulness and passion this team has for our special education youth. So I just wanted to really give a heartfelt thank you from our system. With that, I will hand it over to Rusty.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dutra. Good evening, board members, President Cordero, Superintendent Ontiveros, family and friends that are out in the audience, and the cabinet that's here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys tonight about our first look at significant disproportionality. We're going to help you out with that word, and we're going to call it SIGDIS very often. So you're going to hear me say SIGDIS a little bit when you attend meetings throughout the state, and in some of our meetings, you'll hear that too. So this is significant disproportionality, and it's shortened in our parlance into SIGDIS. As we progress through this journey, there will be many opportunities to dive deep into this. It is anticipated that when we do this work, it will be directly linked to our visions for student success. Every student learns at grade level and beyond through effective Tier 1 practices. This work will also align with our culture of high expectations, and it will tie directly into our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and our culture responsive multi-tier systems of support. This is a system-wide journey. It's not just a special education journey. So I just want to make sure we do that. So we asked, what is disproportionality? The next slide, is it, you guys see in the next slide?
We lost you.
We lost the screen
No, we
share.
The
lost-
slide ran away.
Oh,
You were sharing your screen and then now it's back. Now it's
Perfect.
there.
So what is the disproportionality? It is an overrepresentation of students in special education in identification, location, that is where they're served, and or discipline by race or ethnicity. It's a federal monitoring requirement from Individuals with Disabilities Act, another acronym for you, IDEA. And so the impacts of over identification result in lower expectations. We have social consequences that carry on with students throughout their career and into their adulthood. This occurs when there's a misalignment with our vision of student success and what our actual practices are. So we kind of have to take a look at what causes significant disproportionality. And now there's your SIGDIS for you. There's the easy part for you. The reasons are systemic. We have to go back and look and see where our practices and alignments don't align. As we look forward, we'll dive deeper in the coming months to look at these areas, which are, as the district has already begun to address in our previous work and the work that we're embarking on through the diversity, equity, and inclusion. There will be opportunities along the way for us to come back together to deepen our understanding into our learning. We'll do this quite often, I imagine. The hypothesis is that we will see an intersection of everything that we do as a system has an impact on what this data made up this data for significant disproportionality. See, I can't even say it. SIGDIS. So the disproportionality monitoring is a system of continuous monitoring and revision of our effectiveness and our compliance with special education students. Our team, Ms. Dutra called out, our SELPA, our state and our federal system review students' IEP data is pulled a couple times a year. When necessary, we are prescribed corrective actions. We are continually monitoring our performance indicators and taking corrective actions to improve when necessary. Some of the actions that we have taken in the past are our school psychologists have embarked on work groups to review criteria for testing and assessment and to participate in trainings. We review and we calibrate the tests and the interpretations so it's system-wide, there's equity. We review our policies and procedures to make sure they align with the state and the federal government, and the SELPA does help us do that, and to make sure everything is going forward. When we do the disproportionality monitoring, there is no root cause analysis at this point. So it's just, what are we doing? How are we doing it? And are we doing the proper things? So now when we get into the next slide, we try to figure out where and how Santa Maria Benita has been identified for significantly disproportionate. We've been identified for significantly disproportionality, it is a mouthful, due to the number of white students with IEPs in the identification of disproportionality by disability. And that is autism as compared to our Hispanic populations for over the last 3 consecutive years, 2017-18 school year, 2018-19, 2019-20. So this significant disproportionality will result in, we're just starting on a 27-month cycle to look at this. Here's a look at our data over the last 3 years. As you can see, when we compare the ratio of white students with autism to our largest group of students, Hispanic, there is a disproportionality. The disproportionality being greater than 3 is in the risk ratio has triggered the process, and that's a far right column. Notice where we have made gains for the last 3 years to address this, but we did not get under 3 last year, and that is what triggered this. With significant disproportionalities, funding implications are realized. We need to set aside and use 15% of our federal education dollars over the next 27 months that we receive for special education on system-wide initiatives that will address a significant disproportionality and ensure we are preventing under or over identification. This is not new money that's coming in. It's not additional money. This is the money that we already get through special education that we have to carve out and look at and use. These funds could have some impact on the general education fund, as we have an obligation to continue to meet our maintenance of effort. And for us at Santa Maria Benita, it's approximately $528,000 that will be set aside for this work. The 27-month journey, which is just beginning, and improvement will occur in 4 phases. We are currently in phase 1. The recognition of the assurance document tonight is the first step of that phase. Here are some of the activities that we'll be doing in each of the phases. I'm going to call in phase one of the phases that we have to do is we have to choose a state-approved facilitator, and that facilitator is a consultant who is trained in the area of our disproportionality, help guide us through, to focus us, and to direct our understanding and discovery. The skill set will enhance our learning and understanding and also keep us on track to move forward to help prevent this in the future. Phases 3 and 4 continue. Will continue. It's the cycle of discovery, the cycle of reviewing. Very similar to what we do right now. So I want to leave you a couple of key takeaways as we get to the end of our first look at this journey. So when we look at disproportionality years 1 and 2, we have to look at them differently. So that's what my staff does. And that's what we do every time we get the data. Years 1 and 2, we look and see what is causing it. We dig deep into it. We try to influence and make those changes and improve as we go along. You can see we made some improvement, but we didn't make enough. There is a huge importance on the general education, special education collaboration, the systemness that we're already developing and building and that we have within our network and our district is huge. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion work will have a positive impact on all of this also, and for all our students. Also, our NTSS process is culture responsive and also will help form this. I appreciate your time tonight to look at this. We will come back to SIG-DIS, and we will have a great journey on this. It'll be it actually is, districts that have gone through this say that it is a positive experience for everybody. So I appreciate your time.
Mr. Gordon, would you go back to the graph, the 3-year graph? I'd like to look at that again. There we go. So at this point is there any speculation, I guess would be the appropriate word, as to why this, and the numbers here, the students with disabilities in each of these 3 years, those numbers are specifically students in each of these categories that have been identified with autism.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So what these numbers tell us, what they do is they actually take those numbers in our largest group being Hispanic. They divide the total number of disabilities into the students with autism to get to that ratio.
Mm-hmm.
And the maximum ratio that the state and federal allows you to have is a disparity of 3. And so when we look at the number of students with autism that are Hispanic, we come up to 0.39%. And when we do it, or 0.39, but when we look at, I'm looking at 1920, when we look at the white students for 1920, we're at 3.15. And so it's over 3. And so then that's what causes that just slightly over. They go from there. Do we have an idea why? We're working with the high school district who was put in significant disproportionality last year and going through their processes with them. And so we're working closely with them. We're looking closely with them because what we do affects them directly. And so that has an impact. So we're going through their processes. I actually meet with them tomorrow to go through what their first report looked like that they submitted to the state.
And it's in the same area, autism.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we want to make sure.
I
think
kind
we-
of got the idea of, what this was, but this is,
These are real numbers.
I'm shocked at the area, the autism area. I really am. Thank you. Very interesting. I will look forward to the updates.
It's the areas of speculation are numerous, so just kind of sitting down, letting the data take us through it, and then making with stakeholders is the best way to go about it. We just kind of go through where the journey takes us.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I would accept a motion.
I make a motion that Board of Education approve the 2021 significant proportionality assurance of compliance as presented.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Flores, seconded by Mr. Laura, to approve the 2021 significant disproportionality assurance of compliance as presented. All those in favor signify by aye or thumbs up or hands raised.
Aye.
Okay. Approved unanimously, and thank you. This is a new area. And as you indicated, it's going to, it feeds directly into, other areas of equity and that kind of thing as well. So thank you very much, Mr. Gordon. Ms. Dutra, thank you. Very interesting. Moving on to discussion item 8A, our very, very favorite topic is the COVID-19 status update. I know, we need to, beat sticks together or something.
It is, it's interesting that, the month goes so quickly. And so much changes within that period of time related to COVID and how it impacts, the status of schools. And so tonight is really an update. We're seeing some significant change over the last 4 weeks. And so I appreciate the board authorizing that special meeting in 2 weeks, because there's some movement occurring, and there's some positive movement occurring in Santa Barbara County. And so I wanted to share all that tonight. And this is really a fire hose. I'm gonna go through this quickly. I'm gonna refer to a lot of documentation I shared with the board last week. I think I sent links to all of the new public health guidelines that have come out. We've got teams working on all aspect of that. We're working with our labor partners. I meet with CSEA President Matt Harris and SMEA President Jose Segura twice a week. And this really is our one topic of conversation, just trying to get our heads wrapped around the direction and the change. And so what I'm going to do tonight is go back. I talked 4 weeks ago about this Safe Schools for All plan that had been introduced by the governor on New Year's Eve. And so I want to provide an update on that. I want to go back over the COVID case rates, because we are actually seeing some positive trends in California and in our region on the statewide, countywide, and even at our local level. And then I want to dig in, where I'm going to dig in the deepest is on this, the Department of Public Health's new COVID-19 and reopening in-person instruction framework and public health guidance for K-12 schools in California 2020-2021 school year. That's like the longest title for a 100-page document that is just full of information. And I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go through it page by page, but I really just want to set the stage for the next meeting and to get some feedback, because we're starting to see some movement that's in the right direction. And there's, with the information come lots of questions. So that's the purpose for tonight, is to get your feedback, your questions, so that we can come back in 2 weeks and really fill in some of the gaps that as I go through this tonight, you'll see are still out there. So as far as the Safe Schools for All plan, again, it was a proposal by Governor Newsom on New Year's Eve. It was built around 4 pillars for the reopening of schools, for in-person instruction. There was a funding mechanism, some incentive funds. There was a stipulation of safety and mitigation measures across all schools that included testing, PPE, the protective equipment, contact tracing, and vaccinations. Again, it was a month ago. There were some real thoughts about where we would have been a month ago, and on the vaccination side, we haven't made the progress that we had hoped at this point. So I'll talk about that just briefly tonight. There was a pillar of oversight and assistance through public health to really partner with schools to do some analyses of how things were going, because there were some new requirements that I'll get to in a moment. And this transparency and accountability about how we're doing across the state. And one of the things that came out of this work after the last board meeting was this Safe Schools for All hub. And I want to go there just so you get an opportunity to see it. This is kind of the clearinghouse of information around the school reopening effort statewide, you know, and it's hard. When I just think of our county, we've got 20 districts. 10 of the 20 are single school districts. Santa Maria Bonita itself is larger than the 15 smallest combined. And so, you know, when you try and create a one size fits all, we're obviously different sizes, and it generally doesn't fit anybody, let alone one. But this hub is just kind of a clearinghouse of information for schools, for parents. It's got the background on the plan, you know, around how we can increase testing, because that's one of the big pieces, you know, the actual COVID testing. It's got the Safe Schools team, which is really that support piece. It's got the guidance document that I'll share with you in a moment. The safety plan components that I'll share briefly tonight. And this whole notion of transparency really has where are schools in this process across the state. And there's a dashboard there that includes every state or every school in the state. And so we are obligated. I've been uploading. We started on January 25th, which was 2 weeks ago Monday. Every 2 weeks, we've got to upload what our current status is. So for us, still in distance learning, you know, and as we move forward, that reporting occurs every other week, and they're sort of kind of keeping status. And so this is just kind of the clearinghouse of information. There's a link. I will share this. We'll put this presentation out and share it with the board as well, so that you get an opportunity to dig in, because there's a lot of information that trying to get into one place. Aside from this, you know, our team, and I'll call out Melissa specifically, she spends her non-waking hours when she's not here really looking at the plans that other districts have put in place, particularly districts that are our size and our composition, to really determine how can we, because the larger districts like us, we're having a hard time making all these elements work. And I'll get to that a little more in detail. So we're trying to figure out what are those larger districts doing that's having, you know, that they're able to get some forward lean into this. For the small schools, it's fairly easy. You know, when you got a school with 100 kids, it's easy to distance kids out. You know, it's not difficult to segment, but when you've got schools whose enrollment is as large as ours, it's a little more challenging. And so that I just share that as just a resource, because this is an example of how we're making progress. It wasn't just the plan. It's here's some information you can use. You know, when you think back when we did the school reopening plans that we had to submit last summer, I mean, there was really nowhere to turn for resources. There was that big state document that had just some recommendations that weren't really built in practice. This is more built in practice. So this is a good step in the right direction. About the Safe Schools for Plan, the way the governor proposed it, it was a proposal to the legislature. It has not been approved. Here we are 6 weeks later. There is some new legislation that has been reworked. All of you get the CSBA updates on a daily basis. There's been recommendations by CSBA, by our labor partners last week, CSEA and SEIU, the Service Workers Union, and CTA combined on some recommendations to the governor. There was a letter that came out, just a recommendation Friday through CASBO and School Services and AXA, really about just some other considerations, because this is a big challenge, as we all well know. We all watch the news every day, right? It's all over the world. People are struggling through this. It's interesting. Last week, Escondido Union High School District in San Diego County reopened. They had the first week they had a quarantined 188 staff members and students. It's a big number, right? And so we really are trying to learn from each other. And so the challenge on the legislative side has really been, what's the right fit, right? You got this plan, and so it's kind of been a back to the drawing board as we're trying to get reoriented around the issues. As far as statewide and countywide case rates, I just want to provide a little background. This is every Tuesday, this blueprint for a safer economy gets updated. This is the report from yesterday. It's always 10 days in arrear. So even though it was on February 9th, you'll see down here, all this data is through January 30th, because there's that 7-day lag that's done through all the case rates. And then to aggregate the data, there's another 3 days that are in there. And so we see a little bit of forward movement. If you remember, a month ago, there were 54 of the 58 counties were in purple. We're down to 53. So one less county, but the overall case rate, we're at 33.1 new daily cases per 100,000 population statewide. 4 weeks ago, that was at 74. So that's good progress. When you look at Santa Barbara County, as of the 30th, we're at 40.1 new COVID cases per day. 40, and you remember that the threshold between the red and purple layers is 7. So we're still significantly beyond that red, that substantial level, still in the widespread. 36.4 adjusted case rate, and the way that's calculated is contingent on the amount of testing that occurs in a county, and they take all the counties that are over a population of 100,000, I think it's 106,000, and depending on how many tests are administered countywide, you get more or less a handicap. And because Santa Barbara County has been testing beyond the state average, our actual case rate gets discounted a little bit. So this adjusted case rate is the rate that's used to determine the tier structure. So we're at 36.4 adjusted case rate up through that time period, up the 23rd of January to the 30th of January. And the next report will come out next Tuesday. And then when we meet again in 2 weeks, we'll have 2 more weeks of data, which will be important. When you look at the county-wide reporting, this is that county dashboard. And the trends across the county are encouraging, more encouraging than they've been in a long time. There's a lot of data that has been aggregated here. So when we look at these actual and adjusted case rates, this is the 30th, where I've got my cursor is that 36.4, and the actual case rate on the 30th is 43.1. Now that still gets adjusted a little bit because there are still cases that get attributed back to that date, and so it could increase. But you see the gap between that line is lessening, and it's going down. This is what's reported. This is not official data. This is data through the 6th, which is 4 days ago, down to 27.7 based on cases that are attributed to February 6th at this date. Now there are other cases that will come in that'll be assigned to that date. That'll probably go up a little bit, but that's getting us down below 30, which is where we haven't been in a long time. That'll come out next Tuesday. Yeah, this black dot will move to February 6th, and so we'll see what that difference is, because that's the next benchmark.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of epidemiology geek I turned into. I get excited for Tuesdays to see where the numbers have gone.
The Super Bowl was last week.
Yeah.
so
Well, and that's again, that's
Another 2 or 3 weeks out.
yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 to 3 weeks out.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to give our county public health folks credit. They've done a lot of public information, specifically around the Super Bowl, encouraging folks, hey, stay home, don't get in big crowds. We saw across the country that wasn't adhered to, so we're probably going to see a little bit of uptick, but it will be nowhere near. This is where we've been case rate in the county from March of last year. And you see if you remember in the summer when we thought it was really out of control, in July we were at 26 cases. We got up to, at one point just a month ago, we were at 98 average daily cases across the county. Yeah. So we're really heading in the right direction. But again, this is just one indicator. We got to make sure that we're following the due diligence, the physical distancing, the mask wearing, all the things that we're going to have to adhere to. And so when we look at countywide and local case rates, I put this document up because this goes back to those reporting dates all the way back to early December. So this is that weekly report. So as of December 5th, the county adjusted rate was 19.2. The actual rate was 24.4. In those, they break down the county by 10 different census tracts, and Santa Maria is its own census tract. And so the city of Santa Maria was at 40.5 at that point. And as we went through Christmas, you see the 26, that county rate had doubled, and the city of Santa Maria was at 72, up to 139.5 that first week of the new year. But lost it there. But we're actually seeing it come down. This is as of that reporting date that I just shared. The 41.6 was the actual county rate, and it's actually a little different on that graph. I did this earlier today, so there's already been some data shifting in that graph. And you'll see the city of Santa Maria, we're at 56.3. And so what we had decided earlier this year as we were tracking this was that local transmission rate is really critical to our schools and our community, less than the countywide rate. We're still at either level, we're still way beyond the 7. But we're starting to see them come a little bit closer. So that's a good sign that, the diligence of folks wearing the mask, maintaining the social distancing, not gathering in big crowds. Hopefully this trend continues. And so that's just kind of the snapshot of where we are up to that last reporting date last Tuesday.
So that 89.3 around New Year's.
Yep. Yeah. So we're, they predicted that we'd see some of those cycles. And so hopefully this is, we're not going to see, as spring comes up, an outbreak like we did last spring. No Valentine's. This may be a Lonely Hearts weekend. And so now to go to this public health, this new reopening, again, the title of this is the COVID-19 and Reopening in Person Instruction Framework and Public Health Guidance for K-12 Schools. And I'm just gonna briefly bring this up. And again, I shared this with the board last week, and I'll post this document with this link. This is this framework. And I think it's about 50 some pages of documentation, less around the instructional piece, because most of that work we did in our reentry plan. We talked about instructional design. So this is really focused on what does it take to get reopened. And then the safety protocols are heavy through the back half of this. And so over the next few slides, I just want to give a brief overview. First, around the reopening part and what that entails, just to get to the point to be allowed to reestablish in person. And then what some of the public health guidance that continues after that fact. So the criteria to reopen for in-person instruction in the purple tier, which is where we are and where we will likely be for, it'll take us a while to get down to 7, I believe. So this is the criteria to reopen while still in the purple tier. In the purple tier, schools, as this stands at this point in time, and again, the legislation is still in the works. This could change. And that's why I wanted to meet again in 2 weeks, because I'm thinking we'll see some type of legislation in between that may modify some of those things. But as it stands today, schools may not reopen for grades 7, 12. They may reopen to grades K-6 if the case rate gets below 25 new daily cases per 100,000, right? We're trending that way. When you see how quickly we went from 89 to 56, we could be there within a couple of weeks. What the guidance requires is that schools should continue to offer distance learning if requested, right? So we can't just say everybody back. This is going to be a big change for us, right? Even if we get to the point where we're able to bring just our K-6 students back is about 12,000 to 13,000 kids. If 25% made a choice to stay in distance learning, that's 3,000 kids. We'd have to figure out how we're going to facilitate that. So this is why I meet with Matt and Jose on a weekly basis to really think about what's that going to look like. We've learned a lot during distance learning, right, that we want to make sure that we capitalize. And so this is one of those requirements that I don't think is going to go away, because even as we get to decreasing transmission rates, and if we get to the point where we're going to vaccinate people, we're still going to be looking at this for a period of time where all that physical distancing and the masks and all the protocols are going to need to be in place. So for some folks, they will likely choose to retain that distance learning format. And to reopen, districts must submit a COVID safety plan, which contains 2 parts. One is this Cal-OSHA COVID-19 prevention program, the CPP, and OSHA is involved, and there was some legislation specific to employees, to their employers, which is really kind of that Cal-OSHA interface that that went into effect January 1st. So we've been sending out notifications to school sites because we've had a couple of positive folks that are working on sites have been identified, and we've been required to notify the site. We've been notifying employees. We've been notifying our labor partners in compliance with the law. And, OSHA really is the highest echelon of safety and security. And so they have designed this CPP. And I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. And then the other side is just the school guidance checklist that goes along with the plan that I just gave you a sneak preview, and I'll go over that in just a second. This is the CPP portion. And it's really, to think of it, it's really an enhancement of that attestation. You remember over the summer when we approved our school reopening plan, we had to meet all the county guidelines for how are we, like we're wearing masks right now. We've been doing the active screening at doorways and the directions within buildings and all those elements that we had to define in our plan. A lot of it is already stipulated in that plan. And so I want to call out Sean Chenoweth, who's our coordinator of risk management, has really been doing yeoman's work to make sure that we're meeting the OSHA standard, which is more discreet. And and continuing those practices. Bijou Beltran and Matt Beecher have been working with both of our labor associations around this issue. We've had a team, a representative from SMEA and 2 members from CSEA that have been working with Sean and Bijou, really going through the specifics within that CPP. I'm not going to share it with you because it's a big meaty document. It's connected to this, but they've really been spending some time digging in so that we understand. So we're being very explicit about those protocols. And specifically, it's the identification and evaluation of employee exposure to any COVID-19 health hazards, right? Really maintaining that contact with public health around that. The implementation of effective policies and procedures to correct unsafe and unhealthy conditions. I really want to call out Matt Harris, because even when we first started bringing people back to work, we didn't have many certificated employees back over the summer, but we had a lot of classified employees. And Matt came to me one day and he said, I've got people that are concerned that folks aren't following the rules. And I said, I'm glad they're saying something. And so that Matt and Jose and I have issued several communications from the 3 of us, just reinforcing, you're helping everybody if you point out if somebody's walking the wrong way up or down the stairs, right? So we really got to make sure that our due diligence is maintained, regarding all these issues. Got to provide and ensure that workers wear face coverings to prevent exposure. And there's been some new description of what an effective face covering that's just come out today that I didn't include in this. They're talking about the triple level face masks that, there's surgical masks are more effective than cloth. I mean, this is stuff that's coming out of CDC. There are some guidelines that CDC is supposed to issue by the end of the week around school reopening. I was watching the news all afternoon because I saw an interview with President Biden Monday night. He said that it could be released as early as Wednesday. I was hoping that we'd have it today, but it'll come out soon. And that's probably going to affect some of these as well. So we're learning more about the science, and that's where we got that group together to make sure that we're really articulating those issues clearly. It's really about training and instruction, right? Because as we learn more, we can't just assume that everybody knows. I mean, all of us still go places and we see people not wearing masks, and we're thinking, where'd you miss the memo, right? So really, just to reinforce, the nature of how the infection is spread, and then really the information about the COVID-related benefits that affect employees that they may be entitled to. We had a leave that was articulated through the end of December that expired December 31st. As we've been working with our partners, with CSEA and SMEA, we're really talking about how can we make sure that if someone is required to quarantine because they have an exposure, how do we assure that they're not running out of leave if they're not able to work from home? And those groups are working through that so that we're articulating that, getting that information out. And that's part of this PPP, that all those elements have to be included. So there's a lot of work that is going into that at this point in time. The other half is this school guidance checklist, and it is truly a checklist that articulates all the information that's within that larger document, and it's these things. Definition of stable groups. We had that cohort guidance earlier this year for bringing back small cohorts outside of the actual return to in-person. This is a further definition of what comprises a stable group at any grade level. The identification of entrance, egress, and movement within schools, again, which was articulated in our attestation with the school reopening, and we're just making sure that we're meeting the new expectations in there. Guidance around face coverings, health screenings, healthy hygiene practices, tracing, contact tracing, which, is becoming a larger issue across the country. The reinforcement of physical distancing, training of staff, and family education, because as we talk about bringing in-person instruction back, now we're talking about this accordion going in and out between homes and schools on a more regular basis that we've really got to be aware that those elements are part of that plan. Testing of staff, and we've been doing that with our surveillance testing. It's a little different. I'll get to that here in a second. Testing of students is an expectation, and the identification and reporting of cases and how that's communicated out, not just currently it's within employee groups, but out to the community. And again, we've been researching what other districts are doing. Many are putting up that have had the opportunity to bring students back onto campuses, are reporting publicly on dashboards how many cases have been identified at specific locations and grade levels, just to make sure that folks are aware, and so that we're building a better understanding of how transmission is occurring. So those are all included in the checklist. And this is has been the talking point. Matt and Jose and I are meeting tomorrow morning just to kind of dig through this piece, because it's just a quick down and dirty on here's all the requirements. You know, you got to propose, you know, what's your grade level, your bandwidth, and then there's just brief descriptions of stable groups. What's going to be your definition of stable groups within your plan? How are you going to assure that the stability is maintained? What, you know, does your plan include entrance, egress, face covering? So all these issues just articulated more explicitly. Have you address those issues? The CPP and this checklist, before a school it can bring back in-person instruction, has to be submitted to the County Public Health Department, which transfers it to the state Safe Schools for All office. And that's really the documentation piece. It goes back to that transparency. Districts are obligated, once they've been approved, to post them on their websites so that it's accessible. And so this is this kind of the breakdown of that checklist. This next piece is really the piece that is the snag in the legislation. And it's this required testing cadence. And there's some breakdown of these case rates, and that asterisk means this is that by the adjusted case rate. If a school is, because at K6, if you get below 25, a case rate of 25 new data cases per 100,000, if you're beyond 14, then there must be as part of your plan symptomatic and response testing and weekly asymptomatic testing for all staff. Means you got everybody who's on campus gets tested. Every child who's on campus gets tested. Same thing at the purple rate. Only it goes back to 2 weeks of that asymptomatic testing, but all the symptomatic, if you've got symptoms, you got to be tested. If you've been exposed, that's that response testing. There's got to be a provision for testing. And then the asymptomatic is every 2 weeks. I mentioned, and this was included in that Safe Schools for Plan, Safe Opening Schools plan last month, and that's really kind of the sticking point. You know, for a small school, you might be able to figure out a way to test 100 students a week. You know, when we just look at our TK through 2, we're talking about 3,000 students, right? So that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge. And so that's the piece we're hoping to get some clarity on in terms of what that testing, what it will look like. I signed up and forwarded to Sean and Matt and Bijou today. We got an invitation from an agency within CDE to really talk about how they're activating this Valencia lab that I mentioned a month ago that the state had procured. At that point, they were talking about having the capability of administering 150,000 tests a week, which barely puts a dent in the student population, but we want to listen to them and see how, you know, how can we maybe leverage that. This is really the biggest challenge, even into that red level, because it's not until you get to orange, which is below 4 case rate of 4, that the asymptomatic testing is not a requirement. So this is really the sticking point in the legislation at this point. And so the process for that guidance checklist is that the CSP is posted publicly And then to the local health department and the Safe Schools team, they have 7 days to review it. And again, 7th through 12th grade reopening is not permitted if the case rate exceeds 7. K through 6, not permitted if the case rate exceeds 25, which is where we are presently. Although the CSP can be posted, right? So as we're seeing these things coming down, this is why I want to get back in 2 weeks to really look at, here's the plan, right? So that we can make some determinations, because it doesn't preclude us from having our plan in place so that when the time comes, we can look at the feasibility of bringing students back for in-person instruction. Mr. Lara.
We gotta be under 25 for like 2 weeks straight before they.
Under the proposal that was the governor's plan, and this, so that's still out there, it's only 5 days.
Okay.
If you get below 25 for 5 consecutive days, then it affords school the opportunity to reopen.
So that's on their graph, but when they're doing tests, like they're saying they're 2 weeks out, is that how they're getting their?
Yes. Yeah, it is on that case rate. Yes. Yes. Yep. Yeah. And that's why that trend data that I shared is important, because we hope it continues on that decline.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure on that. All right.
This targeted in-person instruction may be offered according to that cohorting guidance. I mentioned that when we first talked about this back in November. We've continued to build that design. It's just that as the case rates were increasing, the timing wasn't right, but now that they're decreasing, the rates are coming down. We're really working to build some specificity around those cohorts, particularly the students with special needs and the SDC classes, and we'll have more information on that at the meeting on the 24th. And again, this asterisk refers to that adjusted case rate is the level that's monitored. So that's a fire hose of information, right? And it doesn't really do due diligence to the amount of information that's out there. But I just wanted to get it in front of you, and then any questions you have, any other information you'd like as this situation unfolds through the legislature.
I'm just kind of curious what the rates will be like coming in the February after everything that was gone through, October, November, December, January.
Yeah.
Myself personally, me personally thinking drop off.
Can you unmute, Ricky?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, John. Sorry, we can hear each other at the dais. We forget that you can't hear us.
I was just saying, I'm curious to see what our rates will be like coming mid-March, end of March, being after everything that has gone to end of the year, coming to the beginning of this year. As if we're showing the way they're dropping, if they'll significantly keep dropping.
And I find it interesting too, there's nothing mentioned in the plan about vaccination.
And that really is,
I did the same thing, John. I muted myself and forgot to unmute. The vaccinations, I sit on that county public health meeting weekly. The governor really made an emphasis to assure that educators and childcare are part of that Tier 1B. There was a County Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday. There are in Tier 1A, which was the healthcare workers and those over age 75, there's about 66,000 individuals in the county. About 50% of them have been vaccinated so far. That 1B, which is those between 65 and 75, which is about 44,000 people. About 25,000 that are educators in childcare. So that number is already bigger than 1A. And then you include emergency services workers, ag, industry. That number gets up over 100,000. And we're not even, originally we were hoping that Tier 1B would be in place by the end of January. Well, we're already past there. Then it was mid-February. We're at mid-February. So, unless there's a huge increase in the delivery of vaccine, it's going to be a challenge. And the CDC spokesperson said last week that there isn't really made a statement that there isn't really no risk or expectation that individuals at schools would have to be vaccinated. There was some backwalk, that got walked back a little bit by the president's communications director. And that's why I'm really anticipating what that CDC guideline for school reopening, what it's really going to reflect. But, we're a long ways off in my nickel analysis from getting that whole tier 1B group vaccinated.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure doesn't make me feel comfortable though.
No, but it's all essential workers, right? I mean,
I know.
We're going to the grocery store, we're doing those things, and and by and large, we're seeing the rate come down. So, we got to maintain the diligence around the health and safety protocols.
So one of the questions that pops into my mind, especially regarding the face masks, if they're changing that requirement to be so much more specific, will we have access to those to provide for our students and staff?
And again, that's why I'm anxious for these CDC guidelines, what's actually going to come out versus there's just so much that's in the ether at the moment. Right, and we've really been committed to, following those guidelines. And so I want to see, because I think when those guidelines get delivered, and if they are delivered by the end of the week, this pending legislation is probably going to get adjusted somewhat by those recommendations.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Because
I'm sure it has to,
public health came out with all this documentation within 2 weeks of the governor announcing that Safe Schools plan. So state public health is pretty responsive depending on whatever those, how those guidelines are stipulated. So I think we're going to see things pick up pace here over the next 3-4 weeks. And it's right in line with your point, Ricky. What are the rates going to look like over that time?
Yeah.
Where are we as far as the physical plant goes? I know we talked about directional movement and physical distancing, but what about actual placement of physical devices? like I know when in my office, our front office staff has a divider. Where are Matt? Is that part of the plan as far as setup for the different sites, or what we've got? How we're allocating money for those things?
So, Mr. Ontiveros, if you don't mind, I'll step in and just provide some general information about kind of the plan and the materials that are out there. We do have about 5,000 square feet, I think is the number, of plexiglass partitions out and about throughout the district. Many of those in front office spaces, but a lot of them also in where we're providing assessments for special education. We have people working in direct contact with folks and doing assessments. We have some of it out there as well. We're also working on a plan to bring in bipolar ionization equipment to put into the air intakes, so that as our heaters and air conditioners are running, it's scrubbing the air, if you will, and over time the air is cleaned as it processes through. One of the things about viruses, COVID-19 in particular, is they're really small, so it is really hard to catch them in filters. But by ionizing them, they gain a charge and they start to clump together, and they become easier to trap and less able to transport, and then also ineffective. So that's how that process kind of works in a nutshell. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how it works. I just know that's the description and why it's advocated for. It's easy to install and deploy. And then, as Mr. Ontiveros said, we've got guidelines for arrows and directions, but we also have facilities that we've closed or modified their access so that we don't have places where people accumulate. But also they're also encouraged to keep their space. So we have tape over chairs where there are like communal chairs to make sure that there's space between them. And in the restrooms, we have tape over paired sinks so that people, when they go into the restroom, they are forced to keep distance between each other when they're both using the sink. So you asked a question about plexiglass. I wanted to just share with you some of the other items that are in that general plan. There's more that's out there, but I just wanted to share that information.
No, that's great, Matt, because it really, that was just the example. I think you hit on the spots. I think it's really just understanding or kind of see a bigger picture where it's beyond the masks and physical spacing that there were, and you've discussed them in the past, other physical features and architectural changes that would be necessary to implement the plan. So I just was kind of getting update clarification on that too.
And, you know, and I wish Sean was on with us, but hopefully he's sleeping, because I don't think he does. He's on probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 countywide task forces that's digging into this stuff all the time. And he's informing Matt and Bijou as they're working with the labor partners and our health folks and our maintenance folks. He really is just kind of the, dispensing and sharing that information across, all levels of the system. So he's been a godsend. Has he been with us for not quite 2 years, right, Matt? It's always good. It's always good to get one of those guys before you're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good choice. It's been a couple of years. It just seems like 5. Right?
Yeah.
Because 3 of them came from March last year to now. So.
Well, like I tell you guys all the time, high school was the longest 7 years of my life. And I think, you guys, I thank you so much for the information. I think, the hard part too is there's always this tendency, and I'm around folks who are asking about it, and you hear conversationally folks talking about going back to school, and I think people tend to visualize this as being, we go from distance virtual learning to back to the way it was, or to just right back into the classroom. And for the teachers, especially, I think this, that we've talked about it many times before, the transition to going back to the hybrid or what we can do is going to be a whole nother a large amount of work that's thrust upon them. So I think, that's always something that has to be in consideration, is what is that transition going to look like with teaching and learning, and how is that going to affect the bottom line of continuity and making sure that not only is everybody safe and comfortable, but we're doing the best job we can do to get all that information across and to have kids, making progress. So I appreciate, I really appreciate just the depth and the degree of specificity that you guys have been informing us with, because it helps to keep that vision and clear and as clear as it can, but also help us to be adaptive and moving forward on these short-term bases.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, John. I was looking at Melissa in the square on the screen as you said that. This has become her other full-time job, is just kind of researching how are folks addressing those issues. Who can we really get information from, folks that have already crossed that path, so that we're maximizing on us as experience. And again, I want to give credit to Matt Harris and Jose Segura. I meet with them, and this has really been our topic of conversation. And Matt specifically, in his world of IT, said, boy, we've learned so much in the last 11 months. We really do need to think about how can we ensure that everything we've learned, we take advantage of, regardless of what the future looks like. I honestly, as when we developed that reentry plan last summer, it was really just academics. It was pencil and paper, right? And we know what's happening now, and it's, and again, I said this before, I want to give credit to all of our staff members, our students and especially our families for really, adapting to this situation as best they possibly can. Because it's been a challenge for everybody, but we got to make sure that we're taking that good learning forward. And so what we thought would be the next best step, don't really know. And it's really going to be dependent on how the legislature fills in those requirements, because it's going to be different for a district like ours where our schools are, our schools were crowded before, and crowded and COVID don't mix, right? Regardless of what that design looks like. And so it's really going to impact what we're going to be able to do and how we do it. But we're getting to the point where I told Matt and Jose the other day, if we can get kids back just for a short period of time this year, just to the benefit of next year, so that they've got some orientation around, all these different expectations that are going to be in place. It's going to behoove us to continue to do all the homework that we can do to be better informed.
Superintendent, can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Just a reminder that when we wrote the reentry plan, long ago that was, we had no idea really what this was going to look like. And we certainly had no idea. We had some assumptions, but we had no idea we'd be here a year later. And so, you don't know what you don't know at the time. And so now when we're looking back at the hybrid models that we wrote and what reentry would look like, it was on guesses. And so now we do have so much more information that we're going to have to go back and relook at those models, as most districts have, because we were all in the same boat. No one had done this before. And so we will be going back and relooking at those models to ensure exactly what you said, Mr. Hollingshead, that teaching and learning is interrupted, that the best comments we get is that we've not yo-yoed our system like many districts have, where they go back, come out, go back, come out. It's disruptive to a teacher, to family, to students. And so we haven't done that. And we want to make sure that these new models that we come forward with are the best ones that we can for health and safety, and then for teaching and learning. So know that we'll go back and revisit those models to ensure that those things occur.
Is that enough fire hose for one night?
Yes, I would say, I don't know if 2 weeks can't come quickly enough, or it may seem like an eternity.
Yeah.
So I know I personally read those CSBA updates religiously. I mean, every day. And sometimes I look back at them, just, to know what is going on across the state. And because I am a former administrator, I've maintained my retirement affiliation with both ASCD and AXA. And so I get updates through that as well, along with, the magazines. And so the amount of information, I mean, just in that little realm is a lot. So I feel like, I get what's going on, but as far as looking at specific plans, and I commend everyone who is doing that, and I would be more than happy to look at that too, if any of us can offer an extra set of eyes or anything like that. I know we all are totally committed to really, truly doing what is the right thing for our students and our staff. I mean, we have to look at every single person as an integral part of this process. And the amount of work that everyone is doing is beyond measure. Just as simple as that. So thank you. Thank you to everyone. Okay, if we have no more comments regarding COVID, I will acknowledge receipt of the status update. And we will again revisit this at our special board meeting in 2 weeks. And our last item is 8B, the first reading of Board Policy 0415, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And Ms. Dutra, it has your name on it.
Sounds good. So me again. So good evening. Tonight I'm bringing forward the draft Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI, board policy for discussion. But before we get to the policy, I just would like to give you a quick update on the DEI work that's happened in the last 2 weeks. Directly after the meeting, which was just super exciting, I received a number of emails from leaders, from teachers, saying they wanted to be on the team, excited about the work, looking forward to learning more, which is really exciting as it further shows the great people we have in our system and how passionate they are for our kids. Then I sent out an invitation to every site asking for someone to be their DEI champion. And I talked about that in the board presentation. We've had a strong response. I have over 50 people currently signed up. A few sites did not find a champion, so hopefully they will have someone join along the way. And we also had more than a few sites reach out to me and say, I have 2 teachers who really want to be on it. Can they be co-champions? So who can say no to that? So of course, anyone that wanted to be on it, I took them because you can't say no. Invites to our monthly meetings will be sent out by the end of next week, and we'll get those. What's further exciting about this work, and again, just quickly, is the through line to everything we're doing in the system. You heard that in Rusty's presentation tonight. And I just wanted to give 2 quick examples that just I'm excited about. As you know, we've been working with our high school district to align our systems in supporting our students and families. And we also know that we need to continue supporting our staff and students when it comes to their social emotional well-being, especially as we enter these reentry phases we've been talking about. So we're looking at a partnership with Panorama Education to survey students and staff on SEL measures. So we have a baseline on how our system is social emotionally, which allows us then to support where support is needed. We can track student SEL competencies to provide the right supports for individual or groups of kids, and then track progress over time. And then finally, as equity questions can be included in any survey, it would give us a baseline for our equity work, which when you research what other districts have done that are ahead in this work, they almost always start with some kind of equity audit, which is inclusive of surveys. Not by chance, Panorama Education is the same partnership that our high school district has in place. I think Mr. Valencia probably does that. This will allow even deeper alignment of our systems, especially in thinking about the whole child, of their experience and supports in our system as they move then onto the high school system. The second example that I have of a through line of the DEI work is that DEI work has such a strong call for access for all of our groups of students that have historically been marginalized, which is in direct alignment to our district's focus on tier 1 or grade level instruction that we've been engaged in for almost 2 years. So more to come at our board workshop in March. So now for the draft board policy. Of course, it was in your board packet and you have it there or you've seen it. As I shared at our last board meeting, CSBA came out with a sample equity policy in July of 2018. Many adopted it as is, while others adopted it and included diversity and inclusion onto it. The draft policy I'm bringing forward tonight is about 90% of CSBA's equity sample language. And then I looked at districts that had DEI board policies already in place to see what was added or changed from the CSBA model or sample. And I think there's a lot of copying happening out there, which I'm fine with. So I followed suit and borrowed some of the additional language from those districts that many of the districts that have DEI policies added the exact same kind of language. Nothing changed the spirit or theme of the policy, just more specificity to the diversity and inclusion language. And so with that, I will turn it back to you for a board discussion on the draft policy.
Is there anything in particular that you would like us to take a specific look at?
You know, for me in working on this policy, I mean, there was a small sense of pride that there's quite a bit in here that we've already started the beginning stages of. You know, you're never done and you're never there, but some of this we've already started, you know, even prior to me, but things we've already started, I think were exciting when looking at this. The other piece that's just important to note, and this is what I'm being told, because I haven't been here that long, but that this is really a first in what people can remember of us bringing policy to then be able to bring work from it versus an updated policy, or we had to do a policy because there was an ed code that changed. This is really us as a system saying, we want to do this work. We believe this work is important and we want to start with a policy. So we're making a statement that our district stands behind this and that we want to really dig into this and change outcomes for kids and change outcomes for staff and families as well, because marginalized folks are not just kids, right? And so that'll be part of the learning that we do with our staff. So in reading through it, it's pretty direct in what we believe in and what we'll do. I like the pieces that just directly call out how we will encourage and engage kids along the way. It speaks a lot to the whole child as well. So it's not just academics, but it's social emotional. It's ensuring they're connected to school. It's making sure that we're listening to our kids in our community and of anyone in these populations that we're speaking of. And it really just keeps us on track and focused on the work that we have ahead. And again, just at the end, we did add in from other board policy because we think it's important to add in our belief around hiring and our belief around diversity.
Mrs. Cordero, if I may.
Yes.
So Melissa, thank you for that. I think that, it's important that, listening to my wife in the high school board meeting last night, that we recognize that we do share families, like you said. So when we're doing Paramount or something like that, I think in addition to the continuity of passing those kids on, our families are sharing kids in both districts. And so we want to share in that service and that wraparound. For me, in looking through the body of the policy, the one thing that we did talk about in regard to equity at the California School Boards Association meeting this year was student assessment or grading, equity with regard to grading policies, and so I think that's certainly something that the specificity probably is not necessarily in my wheelhouse as far as wording, but it's certainly something I think that board policy can be visionary and mission reflective, like you were saying. I think as you were saying, right, if you're writing a new board policy, wherein we can create a sub heading there that addresses the needs to reassess our grading policies and how they're affecting the equity equation there for our kids, because it's certainly something that's been identified as an inequitable situation. Just my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. I looked up the grading policy. Kristen might help me, and it's decades with an S old. And so I like the bringing it into here because it is part of this work and it is something that we do need to look at as a system anyhow, but through the lens of equity is an appropriate place. So thank you for the comment.
I would agree with that. And since we already have that policy, I think as we work through the further development and, continue with the work, that will be a natural outcome to revise that grading policy and those things that have to do with promotion and attendance and all of that. I think the pandemic has really made everyone really take a long, hard look at, what the challenges are and will continue to be, because we're not going back to what it was. School is going to look and be very different. So I felt that, the itemizing, the 8 or 9 specific things to address really includes other policies that we may have in place that we are going to have to, as like I said, as we work through this, we're going to have to bring those out and take a look at that and update them as well.
And I compliment you too, Melissa, and the folks who worked on this in that. I think as Mrs. Cordero is alluding to, that the wording is forward-looking. It's active. It's active wording. It's not something that's limiting. So I appreciate that too.
I did want to mention, what's old is new again. Equity work has been a passion of mine forever. But when you look at actual board policy in place, it's going to give us the sustainability to continue the work, because for so many years you start doing something in education, and if a new trend comes in or new wording comes in or a new whatever comes in things change. And if you have a policy in place, it is my hope that the continued effectiveness of what has to be done with this kind of work continues. It's just an ongoing look that should be part of our lens every time we're doing something. And sitting here at this table, I look at your champions, and I do not want to be left behind as you have your discussions and your insights. So I'm hoping that we do get to continue in some kind of a book talk or book fashion to continue our enlightenment of equity work too, not just when it comes to our presence in terms of we have to look at it through a policy or material, but in our conversations that thread us to be very mindful of what has to take place to embrace all of this, because this is a big item, a big responsibility. And it has to be at the forefront of everything that we do. So I thank you for that. I know it takes a lot of work. And I want to see it go forward.
Mr. Valencia, take off your mute.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciated this initial draft of our equity policy because it shows our commitment, right, to creating policy that's then going to create actions to move this work forward. And as John just alluded to, looking at grading, I know can be a really heated topic of debate, among educators. I've been a part of these conversations myself, and I know how challenging it can be to have these tough conversations. But the research is telling us, right, that, hey, there's discrepancies in how some of us are grading. And so if I, as an educator, am being in any way biased toward my students in my grading, I need to look at that. And of course, I would challenge my colleagues and all of our staff, right, all of our teaching staff to do the same. And ultimately, I think it actually ties to what we want to do anyway, right, which is to treat our students in an equitable way, right, where we're not letting prejudice or bias dictate how we do things. But we do know, unfortunately, that it does happen a lot more, right, than we would all like to admit. And that's why we're doing this work, because we want to change that. We want to take an honest look at ourselves. One of the items in particular that I really appreciated seeing was item number 5 in the equity policy. It talks about adopting curriculum and instructional materials that accurately reflect the diversity among student groups. And one of the things that I've been a part of at the Santa Maria Joint Union High School District is the Ethnic and Gender Studies Working Committee. We're working along parents, students, teachers, administrators. We've been able to now pass a graduation requirement for ethnic and gender studies. So that is the commitment now that every student leaving our school is going to have a better understanding of racism, of sexism, of homophobia, and other forms of bias and discrimination. And so one of the things that I'm wondering is if we can look at our surrounding districts, because I believe that in Oxnard or in Ventura, they've actually now implemented a K through 12 ethnic and gender studies requirement for their young students, so that way our curriculum and instructional materials also reflect the diversity of our local communities. And so I'm not sure if Ms. Dutra, you've had a chance to look at some of the work that our neighboring districts are doing, but definitely I would highly recommend looking at that, because that can be a model, because these folks, like you said, there's some folks are a little ahead of us in this work, and we can learn from some of their victories as well as some of their setbacks.
Will do. Thank you.
Very, very constructive suggestion. Any other comments? With that, I will acknowledge the first reading of Board Policy 0415, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as presented, and request that administration return the item for further discussion and adoption at our next regular board meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and your support, Board. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our regular agenda. Board members, open it to you first if you have any reports that you would like to make or share with any of us.
I have 2 things. Number 1, I have survived the first week of the NWEA testing as distant learning grandma for a kindergarten, 5th grader, 8th grader, and preschooler. Preschooler wasn't too bad because the teacher did the assessment, but oh my goodness, it's quite a well, it was kind of a chore. I really, you monitor, you make sure your child is focused, your grandchild, so on and so forth. But as a teacher, I know it's so hard to monitor all of this because you are on speaker with your device. So you really can't be talking to the other students, or, you have to find another way to communicate. I know at the junior high school level, the particular teacher that I saw interacting with students during the testing had gotten all their cell phone numbers. So the actual teacher didn't have to call the parent if the child was falling asleep or not attentive or whatever. The teacher just called directly to the student. And it was much more effective, and there was no interruption, there was no distraction. The kindergarten part was just so delightful. I just had to smile because I know the teacher was trying to engage and do their best. Very quiet. You can't be quiet on a microphone. and it was very, very cute because they were very focused and very excited because they were taking a test. They didn't know what the heck a test was, but they were very excited that they were doing that. So I want to thank all the teachers in this aspect of your job. Giving this kind of a test is stressful. It must be very stressful. And just wanting the child, the children, to do the best that they can, you know, I can tell the teachers really wanted that. It's a formative assessment. It's you know, something that you pray as a teacher that they got something that's going to be recalled in this test, but it's a different kind of testing that's going on, and I want to recognize that it's a job, a big job to make this happen. Second, I network with a lot of fellow educators that have been part of my life here and there, and a lot of them have had deaths in their family for whatever reason. It just seems like things have happened, and so I do want to offer that condolence, because it's a hard balance sometimes between trying to do your job and dealing with what's going on in our world right now. So I know it's a hard time for several of them out there that are moving through their job and the loss of loved ones. So with that, I'll take care of what I've said and on to the next.
John, anything?
It's not maybe the same as seeing some of our students, but we did start track practice at the high school this week, and they had their first athletic contest, which was a cross country meet this past Saturday that I watched. So to see kids enjoying one another's company and participating in a kind of a unifying way, and having some interactions with adults and one another in person was pretty dang inspiring. And so, you know, I know that you know, we talked about the plan and stuff tonight, and sometime, some point, things will change. But when it does, man, is it going to be pretty dang neat, because just that little bit was a joy.
Did they have to run with masks on?
No, they go to the starting line. I started the race. They go to the starting line and you say, runners, remove your masks.
Oh, okay.
No, they're allowed to run the race with the mask. They hope they have the mask on their arm or someplace on their body. And then after they've crossed the finish line and they're having their place checked and whatnot, then they bring the mask back up. And
Okay.
then and in practice, it's very easy to keep track and field athletes socially distanced
Okay.
and
Thank you.
masked.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a little bit of a norm.
Yeah. Mr. Lara? Mr. Valencia?
Yes, please. I would like to begin by wishing everyone wishing everybody a great Black History Month. That's February. And I know that as a teacher, because I'm dealing with this myself, that sometimes I get so caught up in all the things that I was originally planning that, you know, I have to remind myself to be more intentional, right, about making sure that I'm incorporating that diverse curriculum. And so, you know, we just saw some data today, right, that looked at our African-American population, Asian American, Latino population. And we all know that, you know, the Latino population in our community is the largest. However, clearly, right, we value the diversity of our community. So I just want to remind our staff just how important it is, right, that our young people not only see themselves in their curriculum, but also see, you know, voices that they might not be as familiar with. And so this February, in addition to all year should be, you know, Black History Month, or Black months where we learn Black history. But what I like about it is that we can pay more, you know, special attention to it and just remind ourselves of why it's so important that we honor that history. So I just wanted to do that for our staff. I also want to thank one of our educators, Mark Wood. Mark Wood invited me to Miller School's Citizen of the Month, and it was a great celebration. So I had the privilege to observe their first guest speaker, which was Francisco Jimenez, which is one of the folks that, right, we have the benefit of naming one of our schools after. And he gave such a treat to the young people there. Just talking about his life story and the struggles of being an immigrant and the struggles of dealing with poverty, and of how education, right, having educators that believed in him, that encouraged him, help to transform his life. So I really want to thank, those educators that in this tough environment are still chugging along and honoring the difficulties that come with this work right now is, just like Linda was pointing out, right? Excuse me, just like Lita was pointing out, it's a tremendous task. And I'm with you in the trenches every day myself, but I can tell you that my students really appreciate it when we honor the challenges that they're dealing with, humanize them, and just also be good to ourselves, right? Be gracious with ourselves, because we're going to stumble and fall as we try to do this work. But again, continuing to take care of our mental health is really key. So I just want to really thank our staff that are doing this great work, and just keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yes.
I will just comment briefly on our local Santa Barbara County School Board Association meeting was last week. Both Mrs. Flores and I were in attendance virtually. Of course, a lot of discussion around COVID, surveillance testing, how there are 10 districts who have done the return to in-person, and I guess I did not realize that they were the one school districts. I knew they were the small ones, but what some of the other issues that everyone else in the county is also dealing with, and the proposal, and how can we test students and staff, and what about the vaccinations, and what about this, and what about that, and but I will commend the school board members from the districts that attend. They are proactive. They're trying to maintain positivity within the work that they are doing, and it's our County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Salcido, is just she provides inspiration and keeps everyone focused, and they're always interesting. It's interesting to hear what other school board members have to share about their districts, and we're, as we all know, we're in this together, and we're in it for the long haul. So, Mr. Ontiveros.
I wasn't going to comment, but Mr. Valencia said a couple of things that triggered a couple of thoughts that I'd share with the board, and I think I will likely share with the board in the future. Something we've been doing since about October, because this is such a challenge, but there are so many phenomenal things that are happening. We convene weekly on Fridays, all of our site leaders and our district leaders, in what I call a virtual TGIF. Really? It's not like the old days, but what we do is we create a spreadsheet where each site puts a link to something that occurred at their school just at some point during that week, just to celebrate with each other. And then we do, if you submit something, then we do a little drawing at the end of the TGIF for a prize. But to your point, Mr. Valencia, recognizing Black History Month, Arianas Junior High shared a stack. It's not PowerPoint because it's whatever the Google equivalent of PowerPoint is. A presentation that the leadership class at Arianas Junior High had done. Each of them selected an African American in history and did a survey and put it together into a PowerPoint. A lot of video. I mean, the kids are so adept at this technology. It was movie clips.
I know.
Yeah, it was just phenomenal, and it's just really been a great opportunity to bring together the wonderful things that are happening at all of our schools. So I will link that to the Friday update so that you get an opportunity to share, because this is hard for all of us to not be able to get out to schools like we normally do,
or see the kids here.
Yeah,
because usually we have parents, kids, somebody here that is sharing all those things.
But we have so many people that are just finding these creative ways to connect. And so so the other thing that you said, Ricardo, was Amanda Scheide-Mantel, who's the principal at Miller, shared the student recognition event. And Dr. Jimenez, who was actually one of my professors at Santa Clara. You know, I was probably his largest challenge as a teacher. You know, 2 kids from Santa Maria, and you know, in a highbrow setting like that. But it shared just again the message that he shared. So I'm glad that Mr. Wood invited you. I got an opportunity to participate in their Student of the Month earlier this year, and you know, it's just there are our school staffs, our community, you know, our school communities are doing such a great job of really, you know, making the best of this situation, right? And there is so much to celebrate that, you know, we've got to be, you know, intentional, was the word that someone said it, and as we were talking about that policy, we've got to be intentional about the things that we're doing, to make sure that we're recognizing those good things. So I appreciate you making those comments, Ricardo, because it was a good link for me to start sharing with all of you some of that fantastic stuff is going on. So you're not just happening to catch it. So I'll make that a commitment moving forward. And that's all I got. And I want to thank Matt for coordinating the audit and bringing John Raymond all the way from Illinois.
That where he is?
He's in Illinois now.
Oh, no wonder he wanted to go to sleep.
I sort of assumed he was in Florida.
Yeah, well, I don't know that he's back to Florida yet. I think he came back to Illinois for a short while. And Melissa, thank you for the diversity policy. It's a great launching point. It's just such a, you know, you talk about dropping a big rock that creates huge ripples. There's an opportunity for us to link a lot of things, John, to your point about really, let's have a conversation about how we evaluate, you know, the growth that our kids are making. And it's going to be a great opportunity to really relaunch a lot of that passion that everybody has for doing the right things at high levels for the sake of our kids. So thank you for all your passion and organization of that work, Melissa.
Well, and with that, happy President's Day to all. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
And it will be Ash Wednesday next week.
Already.
So the calendar just keeps moving, whether we're ready or not. We will reconvene in closed session. Thank you all for being here tonight and for the valuable input that has been provided. And again, for others who are watching, whether you're teachers or students or parents, we do truly know how challenging this has all been. And we appreciate your dedication to your kids and to our students. And we hope that you understand that, you know, our conversations are, we all have the right intention to do what is best for our students and our staff and our community, because our community becomes a reflection of what goes on in our schools. So thank you very much. And with that, it is 8:27. We are adjourned.